Hi, I'm Amberly.
And I'm Beth, and we work at the Southern Utah Museum of Art.
Our friends call us Suma.
We work in the Learning and Engagement team, which means that we get to go on tours and teach people about the art in our museum.
And this exhibit is called This Earth, and it is the perspectives on nature from 37 different artists using multiple disciplines such as painting, drawing, video, music, ceramics, installations, and everything in between.
And these artists all went to the Montello Foundation. It's an artist residency, which means that they got to spend a week at a house out in Montello, which is a city out in really remote Nevada. It's out in the desert, there's nothing nearby. So they get to just spend a week making art with no distractions, no phones, no internet. And so a lot of the art you'll see in the exhibition has to do with the desert, landscapes, nature, and the earth.
So this piece right here is by Ash Verlito, and it is called Basin and Range. It is what we call a cyanotype, which is a special paper made from two different chemicals. These chemicals turn the paper blue, and what we do is we place objects on top of this blue paper and put it out in the sun. And the sun is going to help print those objects onto the paper. And once the paper turns white, we'll know that it's time to take it out and rinse it, and that'll invert the process. So everywhere that was white is now going to be blue, and where we had our objects is going to turn white like we have here with these moths.
So Amberly, how did Ash get all of these moths to stay so still for this cyanotype?
So for this particular piece, she actually did not use the sun. What happened is she used a UV light to attract moths because bugs are attracted to light. So the bugs came and sat on the cyanotype and it printed that way. So Beth, what's your favorite part about this piece?
I actually really like all the different moths. I think moths are so cool, and she actually has a list of all the different species. They're all native moths to Utah, so I like the different sizes and types. So let's go on to the next piece. So this piece, it's actually 8 different pieces. It's by Patricia Watwood, and it's called Montello Book of Hours. And there's 8 different pieces that all show the journey of the sun from the very beginning, the first light in the morning, all the way through the day until the sunset at the end of the day. So as you're looking at these watercolors, you can think about each of the different landscapes and imagine yourself in the landscapes. So usually the sky's blue, but you might notice other colors in the sky. There's pink, there's orange. Have you ever seen a different colored sky, Amberly?
Oh, like every sunset brings out so many different colors, and I think that she beautifully captured that in these watercolors, which I think just makes them so fantastic.
Yeah. I also really like that it is watercolor. You guys can think about if you wanted to capture the sun's journey throughout the day, would you paint it, photograph it, use colored pencils? What kind of medium would you use?
I know that for me, when I'm doing artwork, I really like to use acrylics, but every different medium has such a different way of showing what the art can be potentially. And so for this particular project, I really like that it was watercolors, but any different medium would just bring out something different in those various landscapes. So this is the 7th in the series of 8 watercolors, and it's actually my favorite out of these 8 because of the beautiful, vibrant colors that are here, and just the way that she's got the rays coming out from the sun and these circles that really bring your eye in, and then these beautifully captured dark clouds. And I think that it all just brings the composition together so beautifully, and that's kind of why it's my favorite. And with that, let's go ahead and move on to the next piece. So this piece right here is called The Grid, for obvious reasons, by artist Marcus Guschelbauer. And it is actually a photograph of a landscape with this grid set in front of it. And this grid kind of gives us this feeling of geometric versus organic.
So what's geometric and organic mean?
So organic is nature. It's all of the shapes and things that we find out in the natural world, whereas geometric is all of these straight, rigid lines that we create as humans. And I think that this grid kind of places almost this barrier between us and nature and the landscape.
Yeah, I like how it kind of frames each different area. Like you can really focus on each detail in each square. But yeah, it does kind of, it's like a window, like you're not in nature, you're looking out into it.
And I really love that. And when you were talking about framing each square, it kind of gives us an overall composition, right?
Yeah, like each piece is part of the whole. So one thing I really like about this piece is it's out in this desert. And I don't know if any of you have ever been out way in a really remote place where there's no cars, no traffic. It's so quiet. So that's what I think of when I look at this. I think about how quiet it is. So let's go on to the next piece. So this piece, it's an installation called Twice Migration by artist Kirsten Furlong. And the artist actually came in and pinned each one of these birds up individually. And that's why it's an installation, because she installed it. And it's made up of hundreds of these cut, folded, and glued paper birds. And some of them are pinned by their wings, some by their bodies. So they're all in different positions, but then as a whole, they create this big composition that looks like birds migrating and flying across the wall.
When I look at this piece, I very much notice the shadows that are cast by the wings and the bodies of the birds on the wall. And because it's black and white, it very much plays into those shadows. But if we had adopted like different colors for each of the birds or a variation, I think it would have had a very different feel to it. And this white on white with shadows creates a very dynamic look that we would not have otherwise had it been multicolored.
So have you ever seen birds migrating like this in a big formation?
Yeah, all the time. I've seen flocks of geese flying across the sky, and they create these beautiful dynamic patterns, and you just see them move and flow. And I think that this captures that movement so well.
Yeah.
So with that, let's go ahead and move on to the next piece. So this piece right here is by Bria Ruiz, and it is called Closing In on Opening Up. And this is actually made out of 130 pounds of clay, which is the artist's approximate body weight. And she actually started with that big, huge ball of clay and kicked and pushed and shoved this clay out in all these different directions to create these shapes. And she was very intentional with the way that she broke it up, but it's got such movement and power behind it. And I think that she did a really great job of capturing that movement of going out.
One of my favorite parts about this piece is all the footprints and like the fingerprints and all the texture. And you can really imagine how she was like interacting with the clay with her whole body.
It kind of is in keeping with the theme of this exhibit that we have an impact on nature. And the clay is something so natural, but then we've got all of these footprints and these unnatural colors in there. And we can make something beautiful out of the nature that we have.
So this piece is one of my favorites in the whole exhibition because it's so big and so eye-catching. So let's go on to the next one. So this piece is called Turf and Tokens, and it is by Tyler Beard. And this one's pretty interesting because there's a lot of contrast between the color, the green versus the brown, the shapes, the geometric shapes versus the organic shapes. The medium, we have paint on one side and then ceramic pieces on the other side. And then the image, it looks like grass, whereas these are a lot more abstract. You can't really tell what they are. These little ceramic pieces actually aren't glued down or anything, they're just set in this shelf. So this artist, chose very carefully where he wanted these to be, and he arranged them and rearranged them until he liked how they looked.
So one of the things I really like about this piece is how this painted part gives the illusion of depth and three-dimensionality. And it almost looks like if you could touch these, they would be sharp and pointy. And then we've got these actual three-dimensional pieces. And it's kind of fun how the artist tied the two together in this framework that he did right here. So with that, let's go ahead and move on to the next piece. So this piece right here is simply titled Truck by artist Fred Holcomb. And it looks like a photograph where at a very inopportune moment, this semi-truck drove straight through, whereas in actuality, this is an oil painting. And the artist very intentionally painted this truck to make it look like it was moving through this scene. Do you think that it makes it more impressive that it's an oil painting? Or would it have been just as impressive had it been a photograph?
Yeah, I think like if it were a photograph, we would think, oh, that was a mistake. But it being a painting, like it was very intentional. He knew that he wanted to paint this. And I think it's really cool how he smudged the paint and it looks like the truck is just zooming past. Even though a painting takes hours and hours to make, but he captured this like split second of this truck zooming past. The
motion of this, it really gives it like this fast, high energy to it. And with that in mind, with it being this truck moving across, does your eye focus on the truck or the stillness of the scenery behind it?
Yeah, I think it's hard to focus on anything other than the truck. Like I like to look at all these teeny trees in the back and think about how still they are, but the truck takes up like half of the painting.
Right.
So I think this is one piece that really emphasizes humans and their impact on nature. And that's one thing that we see throughout this exhibition, but this one's pretty obvious. We have nature and then something man-made right in the middle of it. So let's go look at our last piece. So this piece right over here in the middle of the floor is also an installation piece. It's by Kirsten Furlong, the same artist who did the bird installation, and it's called Rings. And it's made up of hundreds of these pieces of wood, all different shapes and sizes, different textures, different colors, and they're just arranged in these rings. And when I look at this work of art, my first thought is it's kind of like an eyeball, like the circle is the pupil, and then the rings are like the iris. It also reminds me of a tree, like when you cut down a tree and you see the stump, there's rings in that too. What does it make you think of, Amberly?
A couple of things that come to mind when I look at this would be a giant bullseye right to that center part, or even like a fire ring, or I can just envision flames coming up from the middle in a big old campfire.
Yeah. The artist created this work with the question in mind of what would it take to unchop a tree? So we've all seen a tree being chopped down, but what if you tried to put it back together, right? How long would that take? Could you glue the tree back together? What about the leaves, the branches? And she's kind of exploring how complex that would be. Like some things, it's a lot easier to destroy something than it is to make it, right?
And I think she beautifully captures that idea that once we've done something to nature, we can't undo it. And even attempting to undo it would take you so long and you could never get it back the exact same way.
Right. Thanks for exploring this earth with us at SUMA.
If you get the chance, come see us in person.
Bye!